Hello, good afternoon. This is the Marketplace. Coming up today, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to present Interim 2021 budget to Parliament this Wednesday with no major policy interventions expected. Also, the International Monetary Fund is warning the country's rising debt stock still remains a major threat to firmly stabilizing the economy. But does that make Ghana a highly indebted poor country? As being rumored, we hear from an economist. Plus, banks without digital strategy for customers may be losing out as customers embrace technology. We'll hear from auditing firm KPMG. Thanks for being with us one more time. Details right after the break. In our first story, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is expected to present the interim 2021 budget to Parliament on Wednesday. That is tomorrow. Now, this after the House approved the proposed date put forward by the Finance Ministry. But this presentation will not come with any major policy interventions. George Yafe explains why in this report.
The country's financial administration laws requires the Finance Minister to present to Parliament the budget for next year no later than November 30 of the previous year, or let's say 1 month before we enter the actual spending year for government. This practice is meant to present the government of the day an opportunity to start the new year with an approved financial statement by Parliament. It's also to ensure that before we start the new financial year, all the necessary debate has been done by Parliament so that the government of the day may have all the required legal backing to spend. But there appears to be something different about this interim 2021 budget. Now, because this year is an election year, there is a likelihood that this government might not be in power to implement the proposed economic policies. That is why the minister is doing this interim budget that would cover the first 3 months of 2021. The move is to ensure that whoever wins this December election will not have any challenge in spending to meet the day-to-day needs of the government for the first quarter of next year. The presentation will therefore outline the expenditure and revenue estimates for the first 3 months of next year. However, the minister will not be allowed to outline any major policy statement or program for next year, as he may not be in the chair to implement it. However, for some, the main challenge will be the full-year budget that will be presented in March 2021. It has been argued that whoever might be in power will have to deal with the high budget deficit coming from 2020 and how they intend to finance it. Will the government today be looking at increasing taxes to deal with it, or go out and borrow, having in mind the rising debt stock and the threat that Ghana could soon be classified as a debt-distressed country by the IMF and the World Bank?
Now, a banking survey conducted by auditing and accounting firm KPMG has revealed that banks that may delay in embarking on digital strategy to serve their customers may be losing out, as well as experiencing declining income from digital banking. Now, this is due to a significant shift onto the digital and mobile banking platforms by customers. So 68% of the respondents in the survey use mobile application platforms for their banking transactions at least once a day. Now, joining us to explain further is lead financial services strategist at KPMG, Robert Jatto. Thanks very much for joining us this afternoon on the Marketplace. So let's begin with a brief background to this survey.
So thank you, Daryl. So KPMG, we recognize that there are quite a number of mega trends, or what you call deeply rooted forces, that are shaping and defining business models of banks and other organizations. So we set out to conduct customer experience survey, particularly to look at the experiences that banks have delivered to their customers during the COVID-19 period. And so we took data from April through to June across the country, and we focus specifically in the retail customer segment. So that's the background, and we are thankful to the number of respondents. We really are seeing some significant shifts around the customer and the customer experience, and we measure some specific things around the customer expectations, and when things go wrong, resolutions, and of course integrity. We measured time and effort and personalization. Those are the key elements that we measured or we used in terms of the KPMG methodology. And we see significant shifts around the digital channel. So shift away from branches to digital. And we think that COVID-19 is an accelerator. Of course, banks have made the right investments, some banks and others who haven't, perhaps may pay the price for not doing so. Certainly, we know that the regulatory support that Bank of Ghana has given, particularly around market conduct and customer protections, are paying off as well. But overall, customer experience is very strongly on the agenda, and the expectations of customers are very, very high.
So let's talk about one of the key findings, as I mentioned in the intro, which has got to do with the fact that banks that delay in embarking on a digital drive may be at the losing end. Can you tell us a bit more about what you found concerning that, and what really would be the implications for banks that, are slow to adopt a digital strategy?
Certainly, like I said before, we see shifts in digital channel usage. So, for example, if we take 2016 and KPMG, we've done this for many years. So 2016 report, we looked at digital channel usage, and you find that some of the channels like using ATM, internet banking, mobile banking were relatively low in the single digits in 2016. Fast forward 2020, as our report revealed this year, clearly there's acceleration that we see around ATM usage, around internet banking. Internet banking is really on the rise, and so is mobile apps. Clearly, we see significant shifts in that. Now, point is, we know that banks have made some investments, but what kind of investment? Yeah. But in delighting the customer, that investment should just not be technology investment, but the investment should be designed around the customer, particularly leveraging data and analytics to predict what the customer is looking for, to begin to say, okay, how do I meet or how do I exceed the expectations of the customer? Because we believe at KPMG that certainly the customer experience is the strongest or the most enduring competitive advantage that any financial institution or any bank can have. And so it's really a business imperative, not just for banks, for telcos, for insurance companies, and for many other organizations.
And what else are we gleaning or learning from the survey with regards to customer behavior during this era of the pandemic?
Well, so certainly we see that in the era of social distancing, customers have pivoted to digital channels, and like I said before. But the other thing we are seeing from the report that we've done is that we see a significant rise in the millennial customer base of banks. And so millennials are people born in maybe they're around the 1980s, and these are entrepreneurs. These are people who are now becoming captains of businesses, and they have some very really strong views, particularly the level of trust they put in social, and some tell us really that if any of the digital giants like Google or maybe Amazon Bank were to come onto the scene today, they will bank with them, and I think that's very instructive. So digital play is critical. They certainly are putting trust in social, and I think it's important that banks respond appropriately in leveraging the various social media channels that they have, in not just trying to reach out, but in resolving issues that banks may or customers may actually complain about. So resolution is a very important thing. We've also realized that whilst expectation is high, integrity in terms of the score that we've had is quite low. And that specifically speaks to the rates and charges that customers say banks charge them. And customers believe that banks may do the right thing or may not do the right thing for them. And so integrity is one area that we think that banks should pay attention to, particularly making sure that we treat customers fairly, as the Bank of Ghana regulatory requirements say, or the guidelines say. Treating customers fairly, making the customer the first, and think customer, think digital will be the message that we have for banks.
Okay, quick one. I'm being bailed out, but not too long ago we had to deal with the financial sector cleanup and its impact on the banking sector. Then we saw that the sector was recovering, and then not too long ago, or it's been quite a while, we are dealing with the pandemic, which is stretching everybody. What's the surest way for the banking sector to recover from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic? especially when we've had to deal with the financial sector cleanup not too long before that?
I think that COVID-19 really, as we see, whilst it's been pretty challenging for banks, it's also an opportunity. And we see that it's really accelerating the digital usage. So that's one area that I think banks need to pay attention to. But also, of course, you are right that the Ghanaian banking sector has gone through some significant reforms and changes. Some banks have disappeared from the high streets, as we all know. So in terms of things that banks should pay attention to, we think that there are sectors that may grow, and therefore banks certainly need to pay attention to those sectors. We do know certainly that gleaning the right insights about your customer will be critical. And even as banks move towards digital, cost optimization will therefore be something that they really need to pay attention to. Interestingly, in the KPMG 2020 report on customer experience, when we asked the specific question about how much confidence do you place in your bank, 40% actually said that they still have so much confidence in the banks. Of course, 51% remain neutral. When we asked the question around specific, where would you keep your money? 71% said they'll keep them in banks. It means that banks still have, customers still really place significant trust in banks. And I think that banks have made the right investment. And of course, regulatory actions and Bank of Ghana support in terms of customer protection, it's paying off.
Thanks very much for your insights this afternoon. Really appreciate it. All right, let's move on now. The Director General of the Social Security and National Insurance Trust, Dr. John Ofori-Tenkwang, has urged employers to ensure they pay the accurate amount of their workers' contributions, since that determines what will be paid as benefits when the employees retire. According to him, this will also ensure a motivated workforce and avoid needless payment of penalties or even prosecution for non-compliance. He was speaking at a forum in Takoradi to commemorate this year's Mobile Service Week, themed Securing Your Retirement, Your Role as a Stakeholder. Natalia Kwanzaa has more.
Dr. Ofori-Tenkwang said contributors on the SNET scheme, aside the self-employed, pay their contribution through their respective employers, and employers therefore play key roles in securing the future of workers in Ghana.
Often these discussions are silent on the role of stakeholders, the role that they are expected to play. Rather, the spotlight has been on SNET. For the monetary amounts that retirees receive as pension. And often the narrative is that these amounts are not enough and these amounts are too small. But as we are all aware of, and if you're not, I'm reminding you today that what you receive as pension largely depends on the actions you take today whilst you are in active employment. And that is pay the right contributions or premiums to ensure the salaries you are earning today. Employers play key roles in securing the future of workers in Ghana. When you start operating a new establishment, you're obliged to first register your business and your workers within 30 days of commencement of operations. You must deduct 5.5% from the workers' salaries each month and add 13% to it, making a total of 18.5%. By the last day of each month, you must submit the list of workers, their SNET numbers, and corresponding salaries. And that's what we call the contribution reports. You must submit these to SNET and remit 13.5% of total salaries as contributions to SNET by the 14th of the following month.
Commenting on the role of workers, he encouraged them to check their SNET statements to be sure if their contributions are being paid and on the correct salaries.
Let me, however, urge you to ensure that you pay your workers' contributions on the correct salaries, since that determines what will be paid to them as benefits when they do retire. It will also ensure that you have a motivated workforce because they know you are securing their future, and also to avoid needless payment of penalties or even prosecution for non-compliance.
The SNET mobile service is an annual event where SNET officers move from their regular office, set in a pitch camp at vantage locations across the country to bring its services close to their members and clients. For Joy Business in Athalia, Kwanza, Western Region.
At the marketplace, we are taking a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the marketplace. Now, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, is warning the country's rising debt stock still remains a major threat to firmly stabilizing the economy. This is coming after the fund projected that Ghana will end the year with a debt to GDP ratio of 76.7% from the current 68%. That's according to a Sub-Saharan Africa Regional Economic Outlook released in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, the latest data from the Bank of Ghana puts the total debt stock ending July at 263 billion cedis. Now, Ghana is currently classified as a high risk of debt distress country. As you may be aware, there's this rumor that the World Bank and IMF have declared Ghana a highly indebted poor country. But that is HIPC. But is that really the case? We're going to be speaking with an economist. First, let's hear from Information Minister Kojo Nkrumah, who has been rejecting the claim. He was speaking at the latest nation building updates earlier today.
You'll notice that we focus heavily on the coastal regions plus the northern region, and we'll have an opportunity to speak to some of the major interventions that have been going on in these regions in the last 3.5 years. Before we commence these presentations, however, there is one quick matter that I need to deal with. If you have followed media discussions in the last 24 hours, you will notice a new trend showing up. There are suggestions being spread, particularly on social media, that Ghana has been declared HIPC again. I'm sure you would have noticed that a lot of persons are sharing material on social media that whether the IMF or the World Bank has declared Ghana HIPC or has listed Ghana as one of the HIPC countries. And it is a suggestion that the economy is not in as good a shape as we claim it is. For the avoidance of doubt, and because we have also mentioned that we are aware that some persons in the weeks ahead of the election will seek to spread a lot of false information and fake news, it is important to quickly respond to it right here and right now. Categorically, we say to you that it is not true that Ghana has been declared HIPC or has been added to a list of HIPC countries. The Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, or the HIPC initiative, was a particular program that was rolled out by the international organizations, the World Bank, the IMF, and donor partners somewhere around 2001.
That was the Information Minister, Kojo Nkrumah. Joining us for a quick conversation on the phone line is economist Dr. Said Boakye on the concerns raised about the IMF. So we had the Information Minister there. We may not be in the category of HIPC, but our debt numbers are still worrying. You think the IMF is justified in its concerns about how our debt stock is rising? Hello, sir. Can you hear me, Dr. Said Boakye? Can you hear me, Dr. Said Boakye?
I can hear you.
Right. So how concerning is the fact that our country's debt is rising as the IMF has been expressing?
It is very concerning, and the concern is not because you have debt. The concern is due to the fact that repaying it is becoming a problem. So that is a concern. But I want to talk about the HIPC thing.
Right.
First of all, like the Information Minister said, the HIPC was brought late in the 1990s. Ghana entered into it. And it's not IMF or World Bank that declares you that you are happy to come for it. You yourself do the assessment. They have their criteria. You do your assessment, and see whether you want to go for it or not. Ghana went for it, and I don't think there's a second round HIPIC. And for that matter, Ghana does not qualify if even he wants to go for the debt relief. I don't think there's a second round. So that is it. If somebody is saying Ghana has been declared HIPIC, IMF World Bank never declared a HIPIC, but they have their criteria, and if you think that you meet the criteria, you apply for it. But getting back to the debt issue, yes, of course. One could argue that around 70s, the GDP, debt to GDP is not so much. But you should remember that the country's GDP has been rebased. It was rebased in 2010, it was rebased in 2018. So the GDP has been enlarged. And if your debt to GDP is so much, exceeding 70%, they mean that debt burden is strong. But I don't want to look at debt to GDP ratio. I want to look at debt service expenditure to your revenue ratio. For you repay your debt out of the revenue you have. And that looks quite ugly. And it is very concerning.
Right. We would have to leave the conversation here. We just scratched the surface. Would continue on this probably later in the day. Thanks very much, Dr. Said Boakye, for joining us for this conversation. My name is Darrell Kwao. Thanks for watching The Marketplace.